A
We have them
pregnant
on
woman
count 3,
walks
sir.
into a
Just sign
courtroom
here.
alone. No lawyer, no support, just a
They
single
don't have the
binder
evidence
against
to
12
proceed.
boxes of documents and 3 of the most expensive attorneys in Texas. Her husband sits across the aisle laughing, actually laughing out loud.
You
He
can
has
drop
$40
the
million.
act, Jessica. I know
He has
exactly what you
connections in
did,
every
and
law
everyone
firm
else
in
is
the
about to
state.
know too.
He has already
This
paid
is
her
over.
best friend to testify against her. He thinks he has already won, but here is what nobody in that courtroom knows. Not the judge, not the reporters,
Your
not
Honor,
even his own lawyers.
This USB drive
She has been
contains the
preparing
video
for this
evidence
moment for
proving
4
my
months.
client's innocence.
And hidden in that single binder is a secret that will not just end her marriage. It will destroy an entire empire and send him to prison for 23 years. This is the story of Emma Mitchell, and I promise you, the ending will leave you speechless. Stay with me, because the moment you think this story is over is exactly when everything turns. The courtroom was already full when Emma Mitchell stepped inside. Every bench was occupied. Reporters lined the back wall with notebooks ready. A low murmur spread through the room as heads turned almost instinctively toward the entrance. This was not an ordinary divorce hearing. The case involved a wealthy businessman, a significant marital estate, and allegations that promised drama. People had come expecting spectacle. What they did not expect was the woman walking in alone. Emma moved slowly, not because she lacked resolve, but because the weight of her pregnancy demanded care. She was 7 months along. Her hand rested lightly on her abdomen as she walked toward the front of the courtroom. Her posture was straight, her expression was calm. She did not scan the room for reassurance. She simply took her seat without a word. Whispers followed her. Some were curious, others were dismissive. More than a few carried quiet judgment. On the opposite side of the courtroom sat Garrett Mitchell. He looked exactly like a man who believed he had already won. He wore a tailored navy suit, crisp and expensive. His posture was relaxed in a way that suggested confidence bordering on boredom. Beside him sat 3 attorneys in matching suits, including Victor Hale, a seasoned litigator known for aggressive courtroom tactics. Files were neatly arranged on the table in front of them. 12 boxes of documents lined the wall behind them. Every detail had been prepared. Garrett glanced toward Emma and smirked. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and let out a short laugh that was loud enough for several people nearby to hear. It was not nervous laughter. It was the kind that came from certainty. He had lawyers. He had resources. He had witnesses lined up. And from his perspective, he had a fragile opponent, a pregnant woman alone, without counsel. But what Garrett did not know, what no one in this courtroom knew, was that Emma had been preparing for this moment for 4 months. And she was about to expose a secret that would destroy not just her marriage, but an entire empire. But before we get there, you need to understand how Emma Mitchell ended up standing alone in that courtroom. And trust me, it is not the story you think it is. 18 months earlier, Emma Mitchell was the woman other women secretly wanted to be. She was married to Garrett Mitchell, founder of Mitchell Tech, a cybersecurity firm worth $40 million. They lived in a beautiful home in Westlake Hills, just outside Austin, Texas. Emma had built a career for herself as a pediatric nurse before stepping back to support Garrett's company. Her best friend Jessica Cole had been her ride or die since nursing school. They had been through everything together. Failed relationships, career struggles, Jessica's miscarriage 3 years ago. They were the kind of friends who could finish each other's sentences. One Saturday morning, they met for brunch at their favorite spot downtown. Jessica arrived first, already sipping a mimosa when Emma walked in. Jessica grinned as Emma sat down. "So let me get this straight. Your husband surprised you with a trip to Cabo, bought you a Tesla, and remembered your anniversary without you having to hint." Emma laughed. "I know, it is disgusting, right?" Jessica shook her head slowly. "I hate you. I say that with love, but I hate you." Emma reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. "Jess, your time is coming, I promise." Jessica looked down at her mimosa. Something flickered across her face. "Yeah, maybe." The moment passed quickly. Emma did not notice. She was too busy being happy. When Emma discovered she was pregnant 2 months later, she cried for 20 minutes in the bathroom. Not sad tears, terrified tears. She had experienced 2 miscarriages before, both in the first trimester, both devastating. The second one had nearly ended her marriage. Not because Garrett was cruel, but because grief had made them strangers. This time felt different. She was 34 years old, healthy, ready. She told Garrett on a Tuesday evening. He was working late, as usual, but he came home the moment she texted him. "I need to tell you something. Good something." His reaction was everything she had hoped for. Tears, laughter, promises. He held her face in his hands and said, "I am going to be the best father. I am going to protect you both. Nothing bad will ever touch this family." Emma believed him. Why would she not? He had never given her a reason not to. Here's something every woman should know. Pay attention to how someone promises to protect you. "I will protect you" is love. "Nothing bad will ever touch you" is control wearing a mask. The difference matters. The changes started small. Week 8 of the pregnancy. Garrett suggested she stop working. "The stress is not good for the baby," he said. "We do not need the money." Week 10, he asked to be added to her personal bank account, just for emergencies. What if something happens and you need funds? Week 12, he started checking her phone, not secretly, openly. "I just want to make sure you are not overdoing it. You forget to tell me things." Emma told herself it was love. Protective, maybe overbearing, but love. Jessica noticed it first. They were having coffee when Jessica said, "He asked you to share your location with him." Emma stirred her latte. "It is not like that. After the miscarriages, he is just scared." Jessica set down her cup. "Emma, that is not scared. That is—" Emma's voice sharpened. "Jess, drop it." Jessica dropped it. But the look on her face stayed with Emma longer than she wanted to admit. By month 5, Emma barely recognized her life. Her friends had stopped calling. Not because they did not care, but because Garrett always seemed to answer. "She is resting," he would say. "The doctor said limited stress. I will have her call you back." He never passed along the messages. Her mother Linda lived in Oklahoma. They used to talk every Sunday. Now Emma could only call when Garrett was at work, and even then she found herself editing, softening, lying. "Everything is fine, Mom. Garrett is just protective." Her mother's voice was skeptical. "Honey, protective does not mean you cannot visit your own mother. It is complicated. The pregnancy is high risk." It was not high risk. Her doctor had confirmed a healthy pregnancy at every appointment. But Garrett had convinced her slowly, methodically, that any stress could trigger another loss. That was the genius of his control. He never raised his voice. He never left marks. He simply rearranged reality until Emma could not tell what was normal anymore. Emma's birthday fell on a Saturday in June. She woke up excited. Garrett had promised a small gathering, just close friends, dinner at her favorite restaurant. She had been looking forward to it for weeks. Instead, she woke up to an empty house and a note on the kitchen counter. "Emergency at work. Client crisis. I will make it up to you tonight. Love you, G." Emma stared at the note for a long time. Then she went back to bed and waited. He came home at 11 that night. No apology, no cake, no explanation beyond, "These things happen when you run a company." Emma felt something crack inside her chest. "It is my birthday," she said quietly. Garrett looked at her with genuine confusion. "Why are you being so emotional?" "It is just a birthday. We will celebrate next weekend." Emma went to the bathroom and cried for an hour. When she came out, Garrett was already asleep. That was the first time Emma felt truly alone. Not lonely, alone. The kind of alone that happens when you are standing next to someone who is supposed to love you and they do not see you at all. If your partner consistently makes you feel like your emotions are the problem, not their actions, that is gaslighting. Write it down. Date it. You will need that record later. Trust me. Emma had always trusted Garrett with money. He was the business genius after all. She did not even look at their accounts most months. But something nagged at her. Small things. A credit card bill that did not match their spending. A business dinner receipt from a restaurant in Dallas when Garrett was supposedly in Houston. One afternoon while Garrett was at work, Emma logged into their joint account. The balance was $4,200. Her heart stopped. It should have been over $80,000. She scrolled through the transactions with trembling fingers. Transfers to an account she did not recognize. Consulting fees to a company called Cole Advisory LLC. Wire transfers to offshore accounts she had never heard of. Cole Advisory LLC, Cole. Jessica Cole. No, 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 no. Emma's hands shook as she searched for more information. Cole Advisory LLC was registered 6 months ago. The address was a P.O. box. The owner was listed as J. Cole. There are moments in life when the ground disappears beneath you, when everything you believed about your world collapses in a single breath. This was Emma's moment. Emma did not confront Garrett. She confronted Jessica. They met at their usual coffee shop. Jessica arrived looking perfect. New designer bag, fresh highlights, the kind of glow that comes from expensive skincare. You look amazing, Emma said. Her voice did not shake. She had practiced. Jessica smiled. Thanks. New routine. How are you feeling? The baby? Fine. Great, actually. Emma paused. Jess, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course. Anything. What is Cole Advisory LLC? The silence lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds that confirmed everything. Jessica's face went through 4 expressions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, terrifyingly, something like pity. Emma, it is not what you think. Then what is it? Garrett came to me. He was worried about you, about the pregnancy affecting your judgment. He asked me to help him protect the assets. For your sake, in case something happened. In case something happened. Like if you became unstable. He said your hormones. Emma stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. How long? What? How long have you been sleeping with my husband? Jessica's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Emma, How long? The coffee shop went silent. Every head turned toward their table. Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. Since before you were married. The world tilted. Since before you were married. 8 years. Her entire marriage. Her best friend. Every late night Garrett worked. Every girl's trip where Jessica could not make it. Every time Jessica held her hand through a miscarriage while secretly sleeping with the man who caused her grief. Emma made it to the bathroom before she threw up. She did not go home that night. She drove to her mother's house in Oklahoma. 5 hours of crying, shaking, and talking to the baby growing inside her. We are going to be okay, she said to her stomach. I do not know how, but we are going to be okay. Her mother, Linda, opened the door at 2 in the morning without a word. She just held her daughter and let her cry. The next morning, Emma called a lawyer. Margaret Crawford was 58 years old and the most respected family attorney in Austin. She had handled celebrity divorces, corporate scandals, and cases that made national news. Her office was filled with awards and framed newspaper clippings. Emma sat across from her desk, spreading out bank statements and screenshots. Margaret reviewed the documents carefully, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Mrs. Mitchell, she said finally, based on what you have shown me, you have grounds for divorce and potentially fraud charges. Emma exhaled. So I can fight him. Margaret held up a hand. But I need to be honest with you. Your husband has resources. Good lawyers. This will be a war. I do not care. Margaret leaned forward. You should care. Because men like Garrett do not lose. They destroy. Emma met her eyes without flinching. Then I will have to destroy him first. The initial filings went smoothly. Emma's documentation was solid. Bank records, screenshots, the Cole Advisory LLC registration. Margaret was confident. He is going to try to settle, Margaret said during their third meeting. They always do when the evidence is this clear. 2 weeks later, Garrett's lawyers reached out with an offer, $2 million, full custody sharing. The house, her car. Emma almost said yes. Almost. Her mother urged her to take it during a phone call that night. Take the money and run, Linda said. Start over somewhere he cannot reach you. But something did not feel right. Garrett never gave up this easily. He never lost. Emma was right. The day before she was supposed to sign the settlement, Margaret Crawford called. Emma, I need you to come to my office now. When Emma arrived, Margaret's face was pale. Her usual confidence was gone. I am withdrawing from your case. Emma felt like she had been punched. What? Why? I cannot tell you that. Margaret, you cannot just... I am sorry, I truly am, but I received information today that creates a conflict of interest. I legally cannot represent you. Emma's blood ran cold. What information? Margaret hesitated for a long moment. Then she sighed. Your husband's company provides cybersecurity services to my firm. If I continue representing you, my firm faces exposure. I am sorry, Emma. I have no choice. Emma walked out of that office without a lawyer, without a settlement, and with the sudden understanding that Garrett's reach was far longer than she had imagined. Over the next 6 weeks, Emma contacted 14 lawyers. 14. Every single one either declined immediately or withdrew after what they called a conflict review. One paralegal was honest with her, speaking quietly off the record. "It is not illegal," she said, "but it is not ethical either. He is using his business relationships to create conflicts. You would have to find someone with no connection to tech, finance, or corporate law in Texas. Does that person exist?" The paralegal shrugged. "Honestly, I do not know." Emma hung up the phone and stared at the wall of her mother's guest room. She was 6.5 months pregnant, alone, running out of options. That night, her mother found her crying at the kitchen table. Linda sat down across from her daughter. She did not say anything at first. She just waited. "He is going to win," Emma whispered. "He has all the power, all the money, all the connections, and I have nothing." Linda reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. "You have something he does not have." "What?" "The truth. Mom, the truth does not matter when no one will listen." Linda squeezed her hands tighter. "Then you make them listen." At 7 months pregnant, Ma started experiencing contractions. She drove herself to the hospital. Garrett had canceled her car insurance accidentally, and she could not afford an ambulance. The diagnosis was stress-induced early labor. The baby was fine, but Emma needed bed rest. Her doctor, a young woman named Sarah Thompson, looked at Emma's chart with concern. "Mrs. Mitchell, your blood pressure is dangerously high. Are you experiencing unusual stress at home?" Emma laughed. It came out bitter. "You could say that." Dr. Thompson hesitated. Then she did something unexpected. She closed the door and sat down on the edge of the hospital bed. "I am going to give you my personal cell number," she said quietly. "If you ever need medical documentation for anything, you call me. Do you understand?" Emma stared at her. "Why are you helping me?" Dr. Thompson's expression hardened. "Because I have seen this before, and I know how it ends when no one helps. Medical records can be crucial in divorce and custody cases. If you are experiencing stress-related symptoms due to your spouse's behavior, ask your doctor to document it specifically. Elevated blood pressure due to reported domestic stress is different from just elevated blood pressure. The words matter." 2 weeks before the trial date, Garrett filed an emergency motion. He was seeking full custody of the unborn child. His argument was simple. Emma was mentally unstable, a danger to herself and the baby. He had documentation. The documentation included a statement from Jessica Cole describing Emma's erratic behavior and paranoid accusations. A letter from a psychiatrist Emma had never met, diagnosing her with pregnancy-induced psychosis. Screenshots of Emma's text to her mother describing fear and anxiety, hacked from her phone. Financial records showing Emma had failed to maintain household expenses because Garrett had cut off her access. The motion also requested that Emma undergo a psychiatric evaluation and that she be barred from leaving the state until the results were in. Emma called her mother, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. "Mom, he is going to take my baby. He is going to take my baby and say I am crazy and no one will believe me because he has money and lawyers and I have nothing." Linda's voice cut through the phone like steel. Emma, listen to me. You are not nothing. You are a mother, and mothers fight even when they are terrified, especially when they are terrified. Now stop crying and start thinking. What do you have that he does not know about?" Emma wiped her face, took a breath. The original records before he altered them. "What else?" "Dr. Thompson, she will testify." "What else?" Emma paused. Then slowly the words came. "Jessica does not know that I know about the second account." "What second account?" "When I found Cole Advisory, I kept looking. There is another company, GJM Holdings, registered in Delaware. I could not trace the owner, but the deposits match withdrawals from Garrett's business account. It is embezzlement, Mom. He is not just hiding money from me. He is hiding it from his investors." There was silence on the line. Then Linda laughed. Actually laughed. "Baby girl, you are going to destroy him. Emma made a decision that everyone told her was insane. She would represent herself. Not because she wanted to, because she had no choice. The court clerk looked at her with poorly disguised pity when she filed the paperwork. The law allows you to represent yourself, the clerk explained. It is called pro se representation. But ma'am, in a case this complex against attorneys of this caliber, I have to be honest. Most people lose. Emma took her copies and tucked them into her bag. Most people do not have what I have, which is absolutely nothing left to lose. For 3 weeks, Emma barely slept. She read legal textbooks borrowed from the library. She watched court proceedings on YouTube for hours at a time. She called legal aid hotlines and begged for guidance. She studied Texas family law until her eyes burned. She organized her evidence into color-coded folders. Blue for financial records, red for timeline documents, green for witness statements, yellow for the evidence she had not told anyone about. She practiced her questions in the mirror until her voice stopped shaking. Every night she talked to her baby. I am going to fight for you, she whispered, her hands pressed against her stomach. Even if I am scared, even if I fail, I am going to fight. Her mother came to stay with her the week before the trial to help her prepare. One evening, Linda announced she was going to help Emma practice. Okay, she said, sitting down in a kitchen chair with exaggerated formality. I am going to be the judge. Ask me your opening question. Emma stood up straight. Your Honor, I would like to present evidence of financial fraud. Linda shook her head. That is not a question. Mom, I know that is not. Linda banged her hand on the table like a gavel. Overruled. Emma threw her hands up. That does not even make sense. Young lady, I have been watching Law and Order since before you were born. Do not tell me what makes sense in a courtroom. Emma laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in weeks. Her mother smiled. There she is, Linda said softly. There is my fighter. The night before the trial, Emma could not sleep. She sat on her mother's porch, watching the stars and trying to calm her racing heart. The baby was kicking. It felt like encouragement. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I know what you are planning to do tomorrow. I can help you, but you have to trust me. A friend. Emma stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, Who is this? No response came. She did not sleep at all that night. The courtroom was packed when Emma arrived at 8:30 in the morning. Garrett Mitchell's case had attracted attention. Wealthy tech CEO, allegations of fraud, pregnant wife representing herself. The local news had picked it up. There were cameras outside and reporters everywhere. Emma walked in alone, 7 months pregnant, no lawyer, holding a single binder. Garrett sat at the opposite table with 3 attorneys and 12 boxes of documents. Victor Hale, the lead attorney, was known as the closer for his record of never losing a high-profile case. Victor looked at Emma with something between pity and amusement. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, not bothering to lower his voice. It is not too late to accept our settlement offer. Emma set her binder on the table. I will pass. Garrett smirked, that same confident smile, like he was watching a child try to solve a puzzle meant for adults. The judge entered. Honorable Patricia Williams, 62 years old, sharp eyes, no-nonsense reputation. The bailiff called out, All rise. Everyone stood. Emma's back ached from the pregnancy, but she stood straight. Judge Williams took her seat and reviewed the case file briefly. She looked at both tables, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said, you understand that by representing yourself, you waive certain protections. Emma's voice was steady. Yes, Your Honor, and you have been advised of your right to counsel. Yes, Your Honor, I was unable to secure representation due to conflicts of interest created by the opposing party. Victor Hale started to object, but Judge Williams silenced him with a look. Very well, the judge said. We will proceed. Emma's opening statement was clear, organized, and surprisingly professional. She laid out the timeline of Garrett's financial manipulation without emotion. She presented dates. She presented facts. She did not cry. She did not beg for sympathy. Even Victor looked slightly impressed. During the lunch break, Garrett's team requested a sidebar with the judge. When they returned, Victor's expression had changed. Your Honor, Victor announced, my client would like to offer a revised settlement, $5 million, full joint custody, No psychiatric evaluation required. The courtroom murmured, $5 million. Emma's hands trembled beneath the table. That was enough to start over. Enough to protect her child. Enough to win. She looked at Garrett. He was smiling but differently now. Nervously. He was scared. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge prompted, do you need time to consider? Emma thought about her mother's words. He never loses. He destroys. If Garrett was offering $5 million, it meant she had something he could not afford to have exposed. No, Your Honor, Emma said. I decline the settlement. Garrett's smile disappeared. The afternoon session began with Emma calling her first witness. I called Jessica Cole to the stand. The courtroom went silent. Every head turned toward the back of the room. Jessica walked forward slowly, looking confident in a designer dress that probably cost more than Emma's entire legal preparation. She had clearly been prepared by Garrett's legal team. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like a woman who had never suffered a consequence in her life. Emma watched her former best friend take the stand and felt something cold settle in her chest. This was the woman who had held her hand through 2 miscarriages. The woman who had cried with her. The woman who had been sleeping with her husband the entire time. Emma's questions started simply. How long had they known each other? How close were they? Did Jessica consider herself Emma's friend? Yes, Jessica said smoothly. I still do. The audacity of that answer nearly knocked the breath out of Emma. She gripped the edge of her table to steady herself. Emma nodded slowly. Even though you have been sleeping with my husband for 8 years. Victor shot to his feet. Objection, relevance. Emma turned to the judge, her voice steady despite the earthquake inside her. Goes to witness credibility, Your Honor. If this witness will lie about her relationship with the respondent, she will lie about everything else. Judge Williams nodded. I will allow it. Jessica's composure cracked slightly. That is a complicated situation. I am sure it is, Emma said. She took a step closer to the witness stand. Cole, you provided a statement to this court describing my erratic behavior and paranoid accusations. Is that correct? Yes. And in that statement, you claimed I became aggressive and threatened you at a coffee shop on June 15th. Yes, you stated, and I quote, that I grabbed your arm, screamed obscenities, and had to be restrained by staff. Is that correct? Jessica shifted in her seat. Yes. Ms. Cole, I have here a security camera recording from that coffee shop. Emma held up a flash drive. The coffee shop owner was kind enough to provide it when I explained why I needed it. Would you like to revise your statement before I play it? Jessica's face went white. Her eyes darted to Garrett, to Victor, back to Emma. Victor stood again. Your Honor, we have not been provided this evidence. I am providing it now, Emma said. Texas rules of civil procedure allow for impeachment evidence. Or does opposing counsel have an objection to the truth? The judge's lips twitched slightly. Play it. The video appeared on the courtroom monitors. It showed exactly what Emma remembered. A calm conversation, Emma asking questions, Jessica admitting to the affair. No aggression, no threats, no screaming, no grabbing, just 2 women talking, one of them discovering that her entire life had been a lie. When the video ended, the courtroom was silent. Emma turned back to Jessica. Mrs. Cole, would you like to explain to the court why your sworn statement was completely and entirely false? Jessica's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Let me help you, Emma said. You lied because Garrett told you to. You lied because you have been his partner in this fraud from the beginning. You lied because you thought I would never find evidence to prove it. Victor jumped up. Objection. Counsel is testifying. I am not counsel, Emma said calmly. I am the woman your client tried to destroy, and I am just getting started. Jessica looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at Victor. Victor looked at the judge. No one had an answer. Have you ever felt like you were fighting a battle everyone expected you to lose? Like the world had already decided the ending before you even showed up? Like all the powerful people had already agreed on the story, and you were just supposed to accept your role as the victim? Emma had felt that way for months. But standing in that courtroom, watching her evidence land, watching Jessica squirm, watching Garrett's confident smile finally falter, she started to believe something different was possible. Sometimes the underdog wins. Sometimes the truth matters. Sometimes the person everyone counted out is exactly the person who changes everything. Emma returned to her seat feeling something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. That was her first real mistake. She thought she was winning. After a brief recess, Victor Hale stood with renewed confidence. Whatever panic he had felt earlier was gone. He looked like a man with a secret weapon. The defense calls Dr. Harrison Wells. Dr. Harrison Wells was 64 years old, credentials from Harvard, published researcher, expert witness in over 200 cases. He walked to the stand like he owned the courtroom. He was everything Emma was not: polished, credentialed, expensive. He had never met Emma, never examined her, never spent a single minute in the same room with her, but he had reviewed her case file, the same manufactured evidence Garrett had compiled. His testimony was devastating. Based on my review, Dr. Wells said, Mrs. Mitchell exhibits classic symptoms of pregnancy-induced psychosis, paranoid ideation, persecution complex, inability to accept reality, delusional thinking patterns. Victor nodded gravely. In your expert opinion, is Mrs. Mitchell capable of making sound decisions for herself or a child? No, I do not believe she is. In fact, I would recommend immediate psychiatric evaluation and supervised custody arrangements. Emma's heart sank. The hope she had felt minutes ago evaporated like morning dew. She could feel the jury of public opinion turning against her. She could see the reporters scribbling notes. Crazy pregnant woman, delusional wife, unfit mother. This was how they would bury her. Not with facts, with labels. She stood to cross-examine. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them to be still. Dr. Wells, you have never examined me personally. Correct. Correct. That is standard practice for expert review. You have never spoken to me. No, you have never observed my behavior firsthand. No, you have never spoken to my actual physician. I reviewed the relevant records. The records provided by my husband's legal team. Yes. Emma took a breath. Dr. Wells, I have here my complete medical file from Dr. Sarah Thompson at Austin Memorial Hospital. Thompson has been my physician throughout this pregnancy. She has examined me personally over a dozen times. Would you like to review what my actual doctor says about my mental state? Victor objected loudly. Your Honor, we have not had time to review these records. Judge Williams looked at him coolly. You submitted expert testimony based on records. The petitioner may submit competing records. Overruled. Dr. Wells reviewed the file. His expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. A flicker of doubt. This is inconsistent with what I was provided. Inconsistent how? Dr. Thompson's notes indicate no psychiatric concerns. Stress-related symptoms, yes, which she attributes to domestic situation. But no psychosis, no impaired judgment, no concerns about parenting capacity. So your testimony was based on incomplete information. Dr. Wells cleared his throat uncomfortably. It would appear so. One might even say your testimony was based on deliberately misleading information, provided by a party with a vested interest in making me look unstable. Victor objected again. Judge Williams sustained it, but the damage was done. Everyone in that courtroom had heard the implication. Emma felt hope surge again. She had done it. She had dismantled their expert. She had exposed Jessica's lies. She was going to win. Then Victor smiled. That smile sent ice down Emma's spine. It was the smile of a man holding a royal flush. Your Honor, the defense would like to submit one final piece of evidence. He pressed play on a recording. Emma's voice filled the courtroom. Loud, clear, unmistakable. I am going to destroy him. I am going to take everything he has and burn it to the ground. He will never see this baby. Never. I do not care what I have to do. I do not care who I have to hurt. He thinks he can throw me away like garbage. He has no idea what I am capable of. Emma's blood ran cold. She remembered that conversation. It was the night she had discovered the affair. She was on the phone with her mother, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, not thinking about what she was saying. But the recording had been edited, cut, spliced together, made to sound threatening instead of devastated, made to sound calculating instead of heartbroken, made to sound like exactly the kind of unstable, vindictive woman Garrett had been describing. This recording, Victor said triumphantly, was captured on Mrs. Mitchell's own phone and provided by a concerned party. It clearly demonstrates the petitioner's unstable mental state and her intention to deny my client access to his child. Garrett's phones, Garrett's cybersecurity company. Garrett had been recording her all along. Every call, every conversation, every private moment with her own mother. And he had edited the recordings to destroy her. The judge looked at Emma. Mrs. Mitchell, do you deny this is your voice? It is my voice, Emma said, her own voice shaking now. But it is edited. It is taken completely out of context. I was crying. I had just discovered that my husband had been cheating on me with my best friend for 8 years. I was venting to my mother. I was not making a plan. The full recording is available, Victor said smoothly. We are happy to play it. He was lying. Emma knew it. The full recording would prove she was sobbing, not scheming, but she could not prove it. She did not have the original. She did not have anything. Judge Williams frowned. We will recess for the day. Tomorrow morning, I will hear closing arguments. Mrs. Mitchell, I strongly suggest you consider your position overnight. The implication was clear. The judge thought she was losing. The judge thought she should settle. Emma walked out of the courtroom with her mother. Her legs felt like they might collapse beneath her with every step. The reporters shouted questions. The cameras flashed. Somewhere, Garrett was probably celebrating. When they reached the car, Emma finally broke down. Mom, she whispered through her tears, I think I just lost. I think he won. I did everything right, and he still won. Linda held her daughter in the parking lot and let her cry. At 2 in the morning, Emma's phone rang. She had not been sleeping. She had been staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly, trying to figure out how to say goodbye to her daughter before she was even born. Unknown number. She almost did not answer, but something made her reach for the phone. Hello, Emma Mitchell. The voice was male, nervous, unfamiliar. Who is this? I am the friend who texted you before the trial started. I have information that can help you, but I need to meet in person. Tonight, Emma sat up in bed. Her heart was pounding. It is 2 in the morning. I am 7 months pregnant. I am not meeting a stranger in the middle of the night. Fair enough. There was a pause. My name is Daniel Reeves. I used to work for your husband. Emma's breath caught. What do you mean used to? I mean, I was his head of cybersecurity until 6 months ago. I was the one who built his surveillance systems. I was the one who maintained his servers. I was the one who knew where all the bodies were buried. Until I discovered what he was really doing with client data. Until he fired me and threatened to destroy my career and my family if I talked. Why are you calling me now? Why tonight? Because I watched the news coverage of your trial today. Because I saw what they did to you with that recording. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. And because I know the truth. That recording is edited. I know because I was the one who taught Garrett how to do it. Emma's hands were trembling. I have the original unedited recording of your phone call. The one that proves Victor Hale submitted manipulated evidence to a court of law. I have the metadata that shows exactly when and how it was altered. I have everything. Emma was silent for a long moment. Her mind was racing. This could be real. This could be her salvation. Or this could be a trap. One final test from Garrett to prove she was the paranoid, unstable woman he claimed she was. How do I know this is not a setup? You do not, Daniel admitted. You have no reason to trust me. But ask yourself this, what do you have to lose? Tomorrow morning you are going to walk into that courtroom and you are going to lose everything. Your money, your custody, your reputation, your child. Emma closed her eyes. Tomorrow morning, before closing arguments, I will be in the courthouse lobby, near the coffee stand by the east entrance. Come alone. I will give you everything. Why are you helping me? What do you get out of this? I get to sleep at night, Daniel said quietly. I helped Garrett build his empire of lies. I told myself I was just doing my job. I told myself it was not my business what he did with the tools I gave him. But I watched you in that courtroom today. I watched you fight alone against everything he threw at you. And I realized something. What? I am tired of being a coward. I am tired of being afraid of him. And I am tired of watching good people get destroyed by bad men. The line went dead. Emma did not sleep for the rest of the night. She researched Daniel Reeves obsessively, former employee of Mitchell Tech, cybersecurity expert, stellar reputation in his field until 6 months ago, fired suddenly with no explanation, no new employment since, social media accounts deleted. It was like he had vanished. 6 months ago, the same time Cole Advisory LLC was created, the same time Garrett started moving money, the same time everything fell apart. It could be a trap. Garrett could be testing her. But what choice did she have? Tomorrow she would lose everything. Her daughter would grow up being told her mother was crazy, unstable, unfit. At 7 in the morning, Emma drove to the courthouse. Her mother insisted on coming. "I am not letting you meet a stranger alone," Linda said firmly. "Mom," he said, "come alone. I will wait in the car. That is still not alone. I will wait in the car with binoculars." "That is basically alone," Emma sighed. "Mom." Linda crossed her arms. "Fine, but I am giving you my pepper spray. You have pepper spray." "Honey, I am a 61-year-old woman from Oklahoma. I have pepper spray, a taser, and a very specific set of skills I learned from too many Liam Neeson movies. Do not test me." Despite everything, despite the fear and the exhaustion and the crushing weight of what was about to happen, Emma laughed. It felt like the first real laugh in months. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby girl. Now go get your evidence. And if that man tries anything funny, you scream, and I will come running." Daniel Reeves was exactly where he said he would be. Mid-40s, tired eyes, nervous energy, looking over his shoulder every few seconds like he expected someone to grab him at any moment. He was holding a cup of coffee he had not touched. He handed Emma a flash drive without saying hello. "This has everything," he said quickly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The original recording, full 47 minutes of it. The metadata showing exactly when and how Garrett edited it. Financial documents showing the embezzlement scheme. Emails between Garrett and Jessica proving they planned this together. Text proving he knew about the pregnancy before you did. And something else." "What else?" Daniel looked around nervously. "Evidence that Garrett has been using his cybersecurity contracts to steal client data, trade secrets from major corporations, financial information from banks, personal data from government agencies. He is not just a bad husband, Emma. He is a criminal operating at a level you cannot imagine. And there are very powerful people who want him stopped. Why give this to me? Why not the police? Why not the FBI? Because the police can be bought. Because Garrett has connections in law enforcement. Because his lawyers will bury anything that goes through official channels. They will delay and obstruct and manipulate until the evidence disappears." Daniel leaned closer. But a courtroom, with cameras, with the press watching, with a judge who has already seen him lie. Daniel's expression was grim. That is the one place he cannot control. That is the one place where the truth might actually matter. Emma looked at the flash drive in her hand. Such a small thing, such enormous power. "If I use this, what happens to you? I disappear for a while. I have friends in places Garrett cannot reach. People who have been building a case against him for years but never had the evidence to move forward." He paused. "You are giving them that evidence today. You are going to be the one who finally takes him down. What if this does not work? What if the judge does not allow it? Then you are no worse off than you were yesterday." "But Emma, I watched that recording get edited. I know exactly what was cut. The original shows you sobbing for 20 minutes before you said those words. The original shows your mother talking you down. The original proves that you were a heartbroken woman venting to her mother, not a calculating threat." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder briefly. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Make him pay, not just for what he did to you, for all of it, for every person he has hurt, for every life he has destroyed, for every lie he has told." Emma gripped the flash drive tight enough to leave marks on her palm. "I promise." Closing arguments were scheduled for 9 in the morning. At 8:55, with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, Emma approached the bench. "Your Honor, I have new evidence." Victor Hale looked up sharply. Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. "Evidence that proves the recording submitted yesterday was manipulated. Evidence of financial fraud totaling over $12 million. Evidence of criminal activity at the federal level." Victor jumped to his feet so fast his chair nearly fell over. "This is outrageous. We have not had time to review any new evidence. This is a clear violation of discovery rules. Emma met his eyes without flinching. Your Honor, if the court grants me 30 minutes, I can demonstrate that the opposing counsel submitted falsified evidence, willfully, knowingly, in violation of Texas Penal Code Section 37.09, tampering with evidence, a third-degree felony. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged her gavel. Victor's face had gone pale. Your Honor, this is clearly a desperate attempt to delay proceedings. Judge Williams looked at Victor, then at Garrett, who had gone completely still, then at Emma, standing alone at her table, 7 months pregnant, holding a flash drive like it was a weapon. I will allow it, she said, but this better be good, Mrs. Mitchell. This better be very good. It was better than good. Emma played the unedited recording first. Her words, the same words, but in context. 20 minutes of crying came first. 20 minutes of her mother's voice saying, honey, it is going to be okay. Breathe, just breathe. 20 minutes of Emma sobbing, how could he do this? How could she do this? I trusted them. I trusted them with everything. And then finally the words, I am going to destroy him. But in the original, you could hear the tears. You could hear the heartbreak. You could hear a woman in the worst moment of her life, not a woman making threats. The edited version played immediately after. The difference was undeniable. The difference was devastating. Someone in the gallery gasped. A reporter dropped her pen. Then came the financial documents. Wire transfers to shell companies. Hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands. Embezzlement totaling over $12 million from Mitchell Tech investors. Then the emails. Garrett and Jessica planning the affair, the fraud, the custody attack. Months before Emma even knew she was pregnant. One email in particular stood out. Garrett had written, once she has the baby, we make our move. Jessica files a report about her mental state. I file for emergency custody. She will be so overwhelmed with the newborn that she will not be able to fight back. By the time she figures out what happened, it will be too late. The date on that email was 3 months before Emma discovered she was pregnant. They had been planning this before she even knew she was going to be a mother. Then came the cybersecurity evidence, client data theft, corporate espionage, classified information accessed and sold. By the time Emma finished, Garrett was pale as paper. Victor Hale had stopped objecting. The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for the sound of reporters typing frantically on their phones. Judge Williams stared at the evidence on her screen for a long moment. Mr. Hale, she said finally. Her voice was ice. Would you like to explain how your client came to submit manipulated evidence to this court? Victor opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Emma looked at Garrett. He was staring at her with an expression she had never seen before. Fear, pure, undiluted fear. She had done it. She had actually done it. Document everything. Save everything. Screenshot everything. Even when you think you are being paranoid. Even when everyone tells you you are overreacting. Because one day that evidence might be the only thing standing between you and losing everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe sends you an ally when you need one most. A stranger with a conscience. A coward who finally found his courage. A man who decided that being able to sleep at night was worth more than being safe. Emma would never see Daniel Reeves again, but she would remember him for the rest of her life. The man who handed her the key to her own salvation and asked for nothing in return except a promise. Make him pay. She intended to keep that promise. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Williams reviewed her notes for what felt like an eternity. Emma could hear her own heartbeat. She could feel the baby kicking, as if Grace already knew that everything was about to change. Garrett sat at his table, surrounded by his expensive lawyers, still wearing that look of arrogant confidence. Even now, even after everything Emma had exposed, he looked like a man who believed he would walk out of this courtroom victorious. That was about to change. Judge Williams looked up. Her expression was stone. In the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell, she said, the court finds that the respondent, Garrett Mitchell, has engaged in systematic financial fraud, evidence tampering, and witness manipulation. Emma gripped the edge of her table. The emergency custody motion is denied. Garrett's lawyer started to stand. The judge silenced him with a look that could have frozen fire. All financial restrictions on the petitioner are lifted immediately. All frozen accounts are to be restored within 24 hours. All surveillance of the petitioner is to cease immediately. Emma's knees nearly gave out. She grabbed the table harder, afraid she might collapse. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice growing harder with each word, the court is deeply disturbed by the pattern of manipulation and deception presented by the respondent, the fabrication of medical evidence, the manipulation of audio recordings, the systematic isolation of the petitioner. These are not the actions of a concerned husband. These are the actions of a predator. The courtroom gasped. Emma had never heard a judge speak like this. This court is referring this matter to the Texas Attorney General's Office for Criminal Investigation. The court is also referring the matter of falsified expert testimony to the State Bar for investigation of potential attorney misconduct. Victor Hale went pale. Mr. Mitchell, the judge said, looking directly at Garrett for the first time, I strongly suggest you retain criminal defense counsel. You are going to need it. Garrett stood up. His face was red. His hands were shaking. The mask of confidence had finally cracked. This is not over, he said. This is a setup. She planned this. Mr. Mitchell. The judge's voice cracked like thunder across the courtroom. One more word and I will hold you in contempt. You will sit down. You will be silent. Or you will be removed from this courtroom in handcuffs. Choose. He sat. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said. Her voice softened just slightly, but there was something in her eyes that looked almost like respect. The court commends your courage, your preparation, your refusal to be silenced. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. She did not try to stop them. Your divorce is granted, the judge continued. Full custody of your unborn child is awarded to you. All parental rights of the respondent are suspended pending completion of the criminal investigation. Emma could not speak. She could not breathe. She could not believe what she was hearing. This court has seen many cases, the judge said. I have presided over hundreds of divorces, but I have rarely seen a petitioner demonstrate the kind of strength you have shown. You stood alone against a man with unlimited resources. You represented yourself against some of the best lawyers in this state, and you won. The judge paused, not because you had power, not because you had money, but because you had the truth, and you refused to let anyone take it from you. Emma finally found her voice. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge nodded. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell. And just like that, it was over. Emma walked out of the courthouse into sunlight. The world looked different, brighter, like someone had turned up the color saturation on reality itself. The sky was bluer than she remembered. The air was sweeter than she had ever tasted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions from every direction. Microphones were thrust toward her face. Mrs. Mitchell, how does it feel to win? Mrs. Mitchell, what would you say to other women in your situation? Mrs. Mitchell, do you have any comment on the criminal investigation? Emma did not answer any of them. She could not. Words felt inadequate for what she was feeling. Her mother was waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Linda's face was streaked with tears, but she was smiling. The biggest smile Emma had ever seen. Without a word, Linda wrapped her arms around her daughter and held on like she would never let go. You did it, Linda whispered into her hair. You did it, baby girl. You did the impossible. Emma buried her face in her mother's shoulder and cried. Not sad tears, not scared tears. For the first time in months, she cried tears of pure, overwhelming relief. I could not have done it without you, Emma said. Yes, you could have, Linda said. But I am glad you did not have to. They stood there for a long time, holding each other while the cameras flashed and the reporters shouted, and the world kept spinning around them. Later that evening, they sat together in Linda's kitchen. The house was quiet. The trial was over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was for celebrating. I think this calls for a celebration, Linda said, standing up from the table. Mom, I am 7 months pregnant. I cannot drink. Who said anything about drinking? Linda opened the freezer and pulled out a pint of ice cream with a flourish. This is fish food. It is basically therapy in frozen form. I've been saving it for this exact moment. Emma laughed. Actually laughed. It felt strange, like a muscle she had forgotten how to use. She grabbed a spoon. I knew I loved you for a reason. They ate ice cream straight from the container, passing it back and forth like they had when Emma was a teenager. Back when the hardest thing in her life was a bad grade or a broken heart. Back before she knew what real pain felt like. "Mom," Emma said after a while, "can I ask you something? Anything? Were you scared during all of this? Were you ever scared that I was going to lose?" Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she put down her spoon. "Every single day," she said, "every single minute. I was terrified. I could not sleep. I could not eat. I kept thinking about all the ways it could go wrong, but you never showed it because you needed me to be strong. You needed someone who believed in you even when you did not believe in yourself. That is what mothers do." Emma reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Linda squeezed her hand back. "You did all the hard work. I just made sure there was ice cream waiting at the end." Within 48 hours, Emma's story went national. "Pregnant woman takes down tech CEO in courtroom battle," one headline read. "David versus Goliath," read another. "How one wife exposed a $40 million fraud. The speech that broke the internet," said a third. "Emma Mitchell destroys cheating husband and his lawyers." Her face was everywhere. The photograph of her walking out of the courthouse, one hand on her pregnant belly, tears streaming down her face, became the image of the year. People made it their profile pictures. They printed it on t-shirts. They turned it into a symbol. Interview requests poured in. Good Morning America, The Today Show, Oprah's people called twice. Book deals, movie offers. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell her story. Emma declined them all. "I did not do this for attention," she told her mother. "I did it because I had to, because there was no other choice." But attention had found her anyway. And for the first time in her life, Emma realized that her story might help other women, other mothers, otherwise trapped in their own impossible situations. Maybe that was worth something. 2 weeks after the trial, Garrett Mitchell was arrested. The charges were extensive: fraud, evidence tampering, criminal conspiracy, corporate espionage, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, money laundering. The FBI had gotten involved once the scope of his data theft became clear. What started as a divorce case had become a federal investigation. He was denied bail. The judge cited flight risk and danger to the community. Emma watched the news footage from her mother's couch. Garrett, in handcuffs, being led into a federal courthouse. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His hair was uncombed. His face was hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made him human and left only the shell behind. He did not look powerful anymore. He did not look confident. He looked like exactly what he was: a criminal. "Do you feel anything?" Linda asked, sitting beside her. Emma thought about it for a long moment. She waited for satisfaction, for triumph, for the vindication she had imagined during all those sleepless nights. It did not come. "Relief," she said finally. "Not happiness, not satisfaction, just relief. Relief that it is over. Relief that he cannot hurt me anymore. Relief that my daughter will never have to know him." "That is enough," Linda said. "You do not owe anyone happiness." Grace Marie Mitchell was born on a sunny Tuesday in October. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, dark hair, her mother's eyes, 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes. One perfect screaming cry that filled the delivery room and made Emma's heart explode with a love she had never known existed. Emma held her daughter for the first time and felt something she had not felt in over a year. Complete. All the pain, all the fear, all the sleepless nights and courtroom battles and moments when she wanted to give up. It all led to this tiny person in her arms, this perfect miracle that was half her and half no one else that mattered. "I fought for you," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Everything I did was for you. Every battle, every moment of fear, every time I wanted to give up but did not, it was all for you." Grace yawned. Her tiny fist curled around Emma's finger. "And I will keep fighting for you," Emma continued, "for as long as I live. No one will ever hurt you. No one will ever control you. No one will ever make you feel small." Grace fell asleep in her mother's arms, safe and warm, and completely unaware that her mother had moved mountains to bring her into this world. Linda stood in the doorway watching. "She is beautiful," Linda said softly. "She is everything," Emma replied. 6 months later, life had settled into something like normalcy. Not the old normal. Emma would never go back to that. But a new normal, a better normal. A normal built on truth instead of lies. Emma was living in Austin again. Not the Westlake Hills mansion with its marble floors and empty rooms. A small house near her old nursing school. It had a tiny backyard with a swing set she had assembled herself. A nursery painted pale yellow with butterflies on the walls. A kitchen where she cooked meals for one and a half. A bedroom where she slept without fear of someone monitoring her every move. It was not fancy. It was not impressive. It was not the kind of house that ended up in magazines. It was perfect. She had started consulting for a domestic abuse nonprofit, helping other women navigate the legal system. The work was hard. The stories were heartbreaking. Every woman who walked through the door reminded Emma of herself, scared, confused, wondering if anyone would believe her. But the work mattered. Every woman she helped felt like a small victory. Every success story was proof that the system could work, if you knew how to fight it. Grace was growing fast, 6 months old and already full of personality, laughing at everything, grabbing at anything within reach, discovering the world one tiny miracle at a time. She had started sleeping through the night, which meant Emma had started sleeping through the night, which felt like its own kind of miracle. Garrett was in federal prison awaiting trial. The charges had multiplied since his arrest. Every investigation uncovered more crimes, more victims, more lies. His trial was scheduled for next spring, and the prosecutors were confident he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. He had tried to contact Emma twice, once through his lawyer claiming he wanted to discuss visitation rights, once through a letter smuggled out by a sympathetic guard. Both times Emma had blocked the attempt without reading a single word. He had nothing to say that she needed to hear. Jessica had disappeared. Rumors said she had moved to California and changed her name. Some people said she was cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. Others said she had fled the country entirely. Emma did not care enough to find out. Jessica had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. It was over. Finally, truly over. Or so Emma thought. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, a letter arrived. The mailman brought it with the usual stack of bills and junk mail. Emma almost missed it. A plain white envelope with no return address. Her name written in careful handwriting that she did not recognize. She almost threw it away. She had gotten plenty of hate mail since the trial. Garrett's supporters who believed she had destroyed a great man. Men's rights activists who accused her of weaponizing the courts. Anonymous trolls who sent death threats and called her names that made her stomach turn. But something made her open this one. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Dear Emma, you do not know me, but I know you. 18 years ago, I was exactly where you are now, young, scared, pregnant, married to a man who controlled everything, who isolated me from everyone I loved, who made me believe I was crazy when I was actually the only sane person in the room. I fought back like you did. I gathered evidence. I stood in a courtroom. I told my truth, and I thought I won. But I was wrong. The system protected him. His money protected him. His connections protected him. The judge who ruled against him was pressured to retire. The prosecutor who charged him was reassigned. And 5 years later, when everyone had forgotten, he came back. Not physically. He was too smart for that. But he found other ways. He turned my children against me. He destroyed my reputation. He made sure that every job I applied for, every apartment I tried to rent, every relationship I tried to build, ended in failure. I am writing to you because I see the news stories. I see them calling you a hero, and you are. But heroes have targets on their backs. Garrett Mitchell is not the kind of man who forgives. He is not the kind of man who accepts defeat. And prison does not last forever. Watch your back. Protect your daughter. Build your defenses now while you have time. And never, ever forget. The monsters we escape do not always stay escaped. Sometimes they wait. Sometimes they plan. Sometimes they come back when we least expect them. I do not write this to scare you. I write this because I wish someone had warned me. You are stronger than I was. Maybe you will succeed where I failed. I hope so. For your sake. For your daughter's sake. A friend. Emma's hands were shaking by the time she finished. She read the letter again and again. Each time the words hit harder. The monsters we escape do not always stay escaped. She looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her crib. Her perfect daughter, her entire world, the reason she had fought so hard and risked so much. She thought about the trial, about Garrett's face when the verdict was read, about the way he had looked at her as they led him out of the courtroom. Not defeated, not broken, not sorry, waiting, like a predator who knew that sooner or later his prey would let down her guard. Some battles never really end. Some monsters never really disappear. And some women spend the rest of their lives learning how to fight. But here is what that letter did not say, what its writer could not know. Emma Mitchell was not just a survivor anymore. She was a warrior. And warriors do not run from threats. They prepare for them. Emma read the letter 3 more times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a drawer with her other important documents. The bank records that had saved her. The court filings that had freed her. The evidence that had destroyed Garrett's carefully constructed lies. She picked up her phone and called her mother. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something." Linda's voice was immediately concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, not exactly. But I need to start planning for everything." "Planning for what?" Emma looked at her daughter sleeping in the crib, so innocent, so unaware of the darkness that existed in the world. "For the possibility that this is not over," Emma said. "For the possibility that it might never be over. Garrett is in prison now, but he will not be in prison forever. And when he gets out, or even before then, he might try to hurt me, to hurt us. I need to be ready." There was silence on the line. "What do you need?" Linda asked. Her voice had changed, still underneath the softness. "I need to be ready. I need security systems, legal protections, emergency plans. I need to know that no matter what happens, Grace will be safe. Even if something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you," Linda said firmly. "You do not know that. No one knows that. But I can make sure that if something does happen, Grace is protected, that she goes to people who love her, that she knows the truth about who her father really was. Then we will make sure of it," Linda said. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we will build a fortress around that little girl that no one can break through." Emma hung up and looked at her daughter. Grace was awake now, staring up at her with big, curious eyes. Eyes that looked just like Emma's. Eyes that would one day ask questions about her father, about why he was in prison, about why he had never been part of her life. Emma would tell her the truth, all of it, when she was old enough to understand. But for now, she had something else to teach her. "I'm going to teach you something," Emma said softly, lifting Grace from the crib and holding her close. "I am going to teach you that you never have to be afraid, that you can fight back against anyone, that no one, no matter how powerful, no matter how rich, no matter how connected, has the right to control you." Grace gurgled and grabbed at Emma's hair. Emma smiled. "We will start with the basics. Never trust anyone who says nothing bad will ever touch you. That is not love. That is not protection. That is a warning sign that they want to be the one who decides what touches you and what does not." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "You are going to be so strong," she whispered. "Stronger than me. Stronger than him. Stronger than anyone who ever tries to dim your light." Grace laughed, a sound like bells, like sunshine, like everything good in the world compressed into one tiny human being. And Emma made herself a promise she would keep for the rest of her life. Whatever came next, whatever Garrett tried to do, whatever monsters waited in the shadows, she would be ready. She would fight. She would protect her daughter with everything she had, because that was what mothers did. They fought, even when they were scared. Especially when they were scared. And Emma Mitchell was not scared anymore. She was ready. 1 year later, Emma sat in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C. In front of her were senators, cameras, the nation watching. She was testifying in support of the Domestic Financial Abuse Prevention Act, a law she had helped write. "When I stood in that courtroom," Emma said, her voice clear and strong, "I was alone, pregnant, terrified. The system was not designed to protect women like me. It was designed to be navigated by people with money, with lawyers, with power I did not have." She paused. looking directly at the senators. I was lucky. I found evidence. I found allies. I found the courage to fight back. But millions of women are not lucky. They are trapped in homes with men who control their money, their access to information, their ability to leave. She thought about all the women she had helped over the past year, the mothers who could not afford lawyers, the widows whose husbands had drained their accounts, the survivors who had nowhere to go. This law will not solve everything, Emma said. No law can, but it is a start. It says to every woman stuck in an impossible situation, we see you, we believe you, and we are building a world where you do not have to fight alone. The hearing room erupted in applause. After the hearing, a senator approached Emma in the hallway. Mrs. Mitchell, the senator said, that was powerful testimony. Thank you. I have a question for you off the record. Emma nodded. What kept you going? In those darkest moments, when everyone counted you out, what made you keep fighting? Emma thought about the question. My daughter, she said finally, but also something else. What, anger? Emma smiled slightly. Not the destructive kind, the kind that says, I refuse to let this be my ending, the kind that turns into fuel. The senator nodded slowly. We need more of that anger in the world. No, Emma said, we need less need for it. But until then, we do what we can. That night, Emma returned to her hotel room. Grace was staying with Linda back in Texas. It was Emma's first overnight trip away from her daughter. She FaceTimed before bed. Mommy miss you, Grace said. She was 18 months old now, talking in fragments, understanding everything. Mommy misses you too, baby. I will be home tomorrow. Okay, love you more. After hanging up, Emma walked to the window. Washington glittered below her, a city of power, a city of politics, a city where laws were made and broken. She thought about the letter, about the warning. She thought about Garrett, still in prison, still watching, still waiting. She thought about all the women out there right now, tonight, trapped in their own impossible situations. And she made herself a promise. They told me I could not fight alone, Emma said to the window. They were right, so I will not be alone anymore. I am going to find every woman who is standing where I stood, and I am going to teach them how to fight back. Not for revenge, not for fame, for the daughters we are raising, for the world we are building, for the monsters we refuse to let win. 3 years later, Emma stood at a podium in front of 2,000 people. The annual conference for the Mitchell Foundation, the nonprofit she had founded, had grown every year. What started as a small organization helping women navigate divorce proceedings had become a national movement. Behind her, a banner read, "You are not alone." "Welcome," Emma said into the microphone. "Welcome to all of you who are here because you refuse to give up." The audience was filled with women of all ages. Some were current clients. Some were volunteers. Some were survivors who had become advocates themselves. 3 years ago, Emma continued, I stood in a courtroom in Texas, 7 months pregnant, no lawyer, facing a man who had every advantage money could buy. She paused. Everyone told me I would lose. Everyone told me to take the settlement and walk away. Everyone told me that the system was not built for people like me. She looked out at the crowd. They were right about one thing. The system was not built for us. But here is what I learned. Systems can be changed, and they are changed by people who refuse to accept the way things are. Applause rippled through the audience. The Mitchell Foundation has helped over 12,000 women in the past 3 years, Emma said. We have provided legal resources, financial assistance, safe housing, and job training. We have helped mothers keep their children. We have helped wives escape dangerous situations. We have helped survivors rebuild their lives. She smiled. But we are not done. We will never be done. Because as long as there is one woman out there who feels alone, who feels powerless, who feels like she has no options, our work continues. The applause grew louder. I want to leave you with one thought, Emma said. The most powerful thing you can do for yourself is believe that you deserve better, that you are worth fighting for, that your story does not end in someone else's hands. She took a breath. You are not alone. You have never been alone, and you will never be alone again. The audience rose to their feet. After the conference, Emma drove home. Grace was 5 years old now, starting kindergarten in the fall. Her favorite book was about a princess who saved herself. Linda had moved to Austin to help with childcare. She claimed it was for Grace, but Emma suspected her mother just wanted to be close. When Emma walked through the door, Grace came running. "Mommy, you are home." Emma scooped her daughter into her arms. "I am home, baby girl. Did you help people today?" "I tried to." Grace nodded seriously. "Good. Helping people is important." Emma laughed. "Where did you learn that?" "Grandma," Grace said, "and you." That night, after Grace was asleep, Emma sat on her back porch. The stars were bright, the air was warm, the world was quiet. She thought about everything that had led her here: the betrayal, the courtroom, the fear, the victory, the aftermath. She thought about Garrett, who was still in prison. His appeal had been denied twice. The earliest possible release was 15 years away. She thought about Jessica, who had sent a letter 2 years ago asking for forgiveness. Emma had not responded. She thought about Daniel Reeves, who had sent her a postcard from somewhere in Europe. Just 3 words: "You did good." She thought about all the women she had helped, all the stories she had heard, all the courage she had witnessed. And she thought about her daughter sleeping inside, who would grow up in a world that was slightly better because her mother had refused to be silent. "I did not know I could do this," Emma whispered to the stars. "Any of it. I did not know I was strong enough." But that was the thing about strength, she had learned. You did not know you had it until you needed it, until you had no choice but to find it. Emma had found hers in a courtroom, 7 months pregnant, alone, and she had never lost it since. The next morning, Emma woke up to a text from her assistant. "New client intake. 29-year-old woman, 2 kids. Husband controls all finances. She found us through the website. She is scared but ready to fight." Emma smiled and typed back, "Schedule her for tomorrow. Tell her she is not alone." Then she got out of bed, made breakfast for her daughter, and started another day. Because that was what warriors did. They kept fighting. Not because they were fearless, but because they knew that fear was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Garrett Mitchell was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. Jessica Cole was never seen again. The Domestic Financial Abuse Prevention Act was signed into law. The Mitchell Foundation continues to help thousands of women every year. And Grace Mitchell started kindergarten this fall. Her favorite book is still about a princess who saved herself. But now she tells everyone that her mom is even braver than any princess, because her mom fought a real dragon and won. And that is how a pregnant woman with nothing defeated a man who had everything. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you know, if it made you believe that the underdog can still win, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for every woman out there who needs to hear this story, who needs to know she is not alone. Leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. Share this with someone who needs hope. And remember, your story is not over. The monster does not get to write your ending. You do. Thank you for staying until the end. I will see you in the next one.